Are you a content creator looking for effects to bring your videos to a whole new level?
Welcome to Production Crate.
Production Crate is the resource for graphics, visual effects, music, and much more. On top of that, these assets are compatible with your editing software. Get your unlimited free effects today or premium effects for only $49 a year. Make it awesome. What's up, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video. First of all, I want to mention that after 5 years, it's finally time for a new computer. So we have a lot of stuff in front of us today. We're going to show you guys exactly from scratch how we're going to build this computer. So we're going to have every single asset developed into the motherboard. We're going to have everything put into the case. This is mainly about video editing. So if you want to have all the specs as well, you can find a link down below. This is going to be in multiple sections. We're going to have time lapses all around. We're going to show you guys exactly how everything is put together. So if you guys are excited to get, this computer together, make sure to hit the like button down below, subscribe if you're new, and as always, let's get building. Okay, so we're gonna start off with the motherboard, which is the X570, and you can actually compare this to like the human body's heart. This is where everything gets its power from, such as the CPU, the GPU. We're gonna also insert all the RAM into it, and that's basically the starting point of where we want to go before we're gonna assemble anything else. This is where everything comes together before we're gonna actually start putting together things in the case itself. For the CPU, we actually chose for a 3700X Ryzen by AMD. So this third generation, the Ryzen CPU boasts higher clock speeds and more cores than the previous first and second generation parts, and the Ryzen 7 3700X is now one of the best CPUs for gaming. It also has a lot of benefits for editing and just power in general. You need a good CPU. That's basically what it's come down to. And what's very important, guys, is that you also first just take down that little iron lever. You will have one corner of your CPU which has a different shape. It's golden, it's clearly noticeable, and you want to make sure that that aligns onto your CPU slot on your motherboard. And guys, before you're gonna actually install it, don't apply any pressure. Just align it with a triangle, let it fall into place. Don't go ahead and put any force on it, because it will fit nicely in the slot, because the force and that is nice in place and it stays in place is caused by this little lever that you pull down. So for this computer, we're using 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM. But the thing is, I purchased one stick of 32 gigabytes because initially I was planning to only get 32 gigs of RAM. But I had to purchase another one because these sticks work in team. So I had to pick up another 32 gigabyte stick because they actually have like a slot in between them on the motherboard itself, because like I mentioned, they work in team. So if you're going to purchase 32 gigabytes of RAM and you're not planning to add any more, just buy two sticks of 16 gigabytes instead of one stick of 32, because that's basically how the motherboard likes it. And that's why I also chose to pick an extra stick of 32 gigabytes, just because I have enough RAM for gaming, for editing, for rendering, and all that. And it's very important that these little dots are matching up on the motherboard, so make sure that you don't place them in or try to crank them down upside down, ending up damaging the sticks. So make sure they just align perfectly and keep one slot in between them. You just want to check the manuals of the RAM sticks or the the motherboard to make sure that you're doing everything correctly and that you're not causing any damage. Alright, so first of all, we're going to assemble our SSD, which is going to be a solid state drive, onto our motherboard. This is basically where you can store all your programs, and this is also where Windows is located, just so it boots up a lot faster. And this is the drive that you want to use only for running Windows and installing your software. So you want to use other drives than this one to store your data, pictures, documents, music, all of that. You want to keep that away from your SSD and just use your regular hard drives. So now that we are at the case itself, it is the NZXT H510 Elite in black. This one is ATX size when it comes to motherboards, because if you're going to have a motherboard, for example, the exact same that I have, and you're going to use a micro ATX or a mini ITX, that's not going to fit. You need an ATX full-size mid-tower computer case in order to make your motherboard fit, and also your graphics card, guys. Your graphics card, especially the RTX 2070 Super, is really wide, and if you have, for example, like a really thick CPU cooler, that's going to scratch across your graphics card. That's not good, guys. So make sure that you have a big enough of a case. You don't have to pick the exact same one. All the links of all the components are obviously in the description, but you guys get my point. Make sure that your case is high enough, wide enough, and just large enough, and make sure that it also has like some nice tempered glass at the side, so you can really see that the RGB lighting is coming to life. And what is really cool about this case is that you can place up to 6 HDDs or SSDs, so you can actually build a RAID setup yourself. And just a side note, guys, it is very important that you cannot place an optical drive in this case, because there is no 5.25-inch bay included in this case, and it doesn't come with any power supplies yet. You have to get that yourself, and I would recommend around 750 watts minimum. Alright guys, so now that we have everything assembled onto the motherboard, it is basically time to install this into our case. Now this is basically where your size of the case actually is really important. At first we had like a case that was too small, so when we tried to fit in the motherboard, it would actually, you know, hit at the bottom where the power supply lies. So this is why you need a big enough of a case, such as an ATX, because an ITX or an ATX Mini is not going to cut the job if you have a motherboard like these. So once everything is installed into the motherboard, your RAM is in, your CPU, then you want to take your motherboard and want to place it carefully inside the case, secure those screws and tighten them in place so that the motherboard sits where it's supposed to be. And what's also important, that this case actually came with screws for the motherboard, so you don't have to go ahead and look for screws, for example, in your garage or anything like that, because this case came with 8 screws, 3 at the bottom, 2 in the middle, and then also 3 at the top. And you want to make sure that you won't skip any of these screws, because it's really important that you screw every single screw inside its hole, just to keep the motherboard in place, obviously, so it's not going to go anywhere, it's not going to fall anywhere, because if you're going to add more things to it, for example, like your CPU cooler, more RAM sticks, it's going to carry way more weight and has to stay in place nicely. Because it's also important that you don't use, for example, like the wrong screws. Just put everything aside in a bowl, write it down what kind of screws they are, so you don't mess up and don't confuse any other screws. So right here we are adjusting the stock fans that came with the case, these 2 black ones, onto the Corsair white cooling system. Now this is going to end up having a better airflow, obviously, because it's really important that the air is coming in and that it's also blown out at the right direction, because that's what the back fan and the top fan of the case are for. So that's what we have to do. But if you don't have 2 extra fans that came with your case, you can just install your manual water cooling system against the front of the inside, so that's not really a problem. But if you have 2 fans already that came with the case on top of the 2 stock ones from the white one external cooling system, you can just screw them on real easy. Okay, so now when it comes to the CPU cooler itself, there's already cooler paste pre-installed on it, but obviously you can just take that off and apply your own. It really depends on it. We just left it on because we know that we'll just do the job for the first couple of years before we actually have to, you know, apply a new amount on it. So it's totally up to you if you clean it off first and get your own one, or get like a really, you know, high quality paste and put that on it. It's totally up to you, and that fits really easily onto the CPU by just adjusting these 2 levers along with a couple screws. So for the graphics card, we picked picked the GeForce RTX 2070 Super, and the reason that we chose one from the Super series is basically that they're powered with the Turing architecture and feature more cores and higher clocks. This gives you up to 25% faster performance than the original RTX 20 series and 6 times the performance of previous generation's 10 series graphics card. So this graphics card consumes about 215 watts and it has 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 VRAM clocked at 14 Gbps, but you can always overclock this one. And also make sure they just pinch out like 2 slots at the end of your computer case so it fits in nicely, and it just only takes 1 click to fit on to the motherboard and into the case itself, and then it's ready to go. Just power it and you're all set. So now that the graphics card is installed, it is basically time to connect everything onto the motherboard when it comes to cables. We gotta power it, we gotta power the CPU, power everything, the lighting, the graphics card. So then we need to also pay attention to the cable management. So you wanna make sure that you will pull everything else to the back side of the computer, so no cables are hanging in the front of your computer, for example, like above your graphics card or in front of your fans. That's not good for the airflow. Just use some tie rips and squeeze down all the cables as tight and as neatly as possible, so you also have a very good look in front of the computer, so none of the cables are in the way. Alright guys, so it's the end of the day, and right now it's the most satisfying moment, which is actually peeling off this plastic. So I'm gonna get a hold of it, and you guys are also gonna be able to see what's inside of this beast. There we go. Okay, so we had the peel off. It's actually time to show you guys what's inside, because I received countless of DMs from people asking what the components are, what other specifications, what I chose and why. So first of all, let me turn on the computer and you guys will actually get to see what the inside looks like. I'm gonna also take the side panel off so you guys can get a closer look of the components. When we chose the components, we mainly looked at what is good for video editing. We start off with the CPU, which is a 3700X. We also have a X570 motherboard, and for the graphics card we went for an RTX 2070 Super. So for the cooling we have this Corsair H100i RGB. So as you can see, the fans are actually RGB lit. It looks really cool. And we also have 2 sticks of 16 gigs of RAM. So we have 32. So we have 64 gigs of RAM in total, DDR4. That's especially used for like heavy rendering, gaming, and you know, all the things that RAM is used for. This is basically the new upgrade, guys. I'm gonna also leave all the links down in the description if you want to pick up this exact same computer. It's pre-built. So we did not buy this one put together just because I would also like to learn how to assemble PCs. So if you want to have one component or all of them, links are down below in the description. You guys can actually also follow this video and also see how you can assemble your computer. So after 5 years, it was actually time just to upgrade, because you gotta imagine that videos that were like, I don't know, 3 minutes long, not even 60 FPS, just 720, were taking 15 to 20 minutes to render. So you gotta imagine on this computer it's only gonna take like, I don't know, maybe like 45 seconds. Let's get this beast up and running, get Windows installed, and then we can actually move on from here. So guys, that's it for this video. Thanks a lot for watching. Like I've mentioned, if you want to pick up any of these components or the entire setup, link is down below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you guys obviously in the next one.